This lecture looks at the ideas in Chapter 1, which gives us a nice introduction to economics. So before we get into the big ideas that are represented in the chapter, I'd like to talk a little bit about what economics is. Formal definition: economics is the social science that studies how members of a society make choices under conditions of scarcity. So a few things to look at here. First off, we're saying that economics is a social science. So what does that mean? Well, the other social sciences include psychology, anthropology, sociology, political science. I'm probably missing a few, but you get the idea. And what these all have in common is that we're looking at human behavior. So all of the social sciences look at human behavior. Economics specifically looks at how we make choices under conditions of scarcity. So when we talk about scarcity, we all have wants that are bigger than our ability to satisfy them. We all want more stuff than we can have. We all want more time to be able to do more things. And because we can't do everything we want, and because we can't purchase everything we might want to purchase, we have to make choices. And that's really what economics is looking at. When we talk about macroeconomics, which is not this course, but macroeconomics looks at the collective aspects of these choices and tries to give us sort of a national snapshot of what's going on in the economy. And we often look at some of the big national measurements like gross domestic product or the overall level of production in our society each year. Or we look at unemployment rates across the nation or inflation rates across the nation. So we're looking at big national measurements when we talk about macroeconomics. Microeconomics is much smaller scale. We look at the behavior of individual households and how they make decisions about going to school, how much they're going to work, all of these sorts of things. And so when we're looking at the individual household behavior, that's more microeconomics. We're also going to be looking at the behavior of individual firms and how they make choices and what influence those choices. And then we also look at industry. So we might take an entire industry and say, let's talk about the U.S. auto industry. That would still be microeconomic in nature, even though it's a large industry, because it's just one part of the national economy. So the big point that we keep coming back to is that if we have the right incentives in place, the choices made at the microeconomic level will also give us good macroeconomic results. That's one of the big themes of this course. So, getting to the big ideas that are discussed in our textbook. The first big idea is simply that incentives matter. So if we want to understand how individuals make choices, we have to understand how they respond to incentives. In a market-based economy, our basic presumption is that individuals are motivated primarily by self-interest or trying to maximize their own personal well-being. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's selfish. I attend a church every week, most weeks, and I put money in the collection plate every month. And I do this perhaps partly because of guilt and other reasons, but I think like an economist. And I do this because I believe that the church is doing good things. We attend the church, we get some services from them, my children have educational things there, I sing in the choir, my kids sing in the kids' choirs. We get some personal benefits. And beyond that, we hope that the money the church is using for charities and such is doing good works out there, and that makes me feel good. And so, how do I choose how much to give to my church? I'm a self-interested person. I think like an economist, and my rationale is I'm going to give money as long as I get more benefit from feeling that I'm getting good things out of this and doing good works in the world than spending that money on myself. Big idea number 2 says that good institutions align self-interest with the social interest. And this is attributed to Adam Smith's invisible hand theory from The Wealth of Nations, which was first published in 1776. You don't need to know that, but it's something that is very commonly referred to, so you should have some idea of what it is if you ever hear reference to The Wealth of Nations. The basic idea here is that if each individual is being as productive as possible with their own resources, then society is going to be collectively as productive as possible as well. So if everyone's doing as much as they can to benefit themselves, then collectively we have the biggest social benefit possible. So this is only true if we have institutions that provide the appropriate social incentives. So one of the things we'll keep coming back to is, we need a system of competitive markets in order for the invisible hand to work in a market-based economy. So if we think back to the 1800s, we had a society where the government had very limited influence in markets. The government tried to stay out of markets as much as possible. And this was partly based on Adam Smith's ideas. The problem was we didn't have competitive industries. Instead, all of our industries were combining into these big, large trusts or monopolies. And so we had big companies like Standard Oil and American Tobacco and the companies like the Carnegies and the Rockefellers that were accumulating all the wealth. It was benefiting those families, but society as a whole wasn't as well off as possible because all of that wealth was accumulating toward a small few, and the workers, the rest of us, had pretty much nothing. So if we aren't getting appropriate social incentives, then free markets maybe aren't giving us the best outcomes. The response to the large trusts in the 1800s was antitrust policy being enacted in order to try to make these markets be more competitive. Along with that, we also had a number of social movements and legislation to have labor laws and child labor laws and such to make sure that workplaces were safer and that workers were being treated appropriately. Big idea number 3 says that trade-offs are everywhere. So if we have scarcity, every choice requires sacrifice. I don't have enough money myself to buy all the things that I want. So everything that I do buy means there's something else that I want that I'm not able to buy anymore. So we describe this trade-off as opportunity cost. So opportunity cost of any choice is the value we sacrificed from the next best alternative that we didn't choose. So, for example, you make a purchase, the opportunity cost is the next best purchase or purchases you could have made with that same expenditure. I like to play games with my kids, well, games in my head, they think it's annoying. But I'll take them, to a Quick Trip, a gas station, mini-mart type place, and I'll give them $1 and say, you can get anything you want in the store with your $1. You can't spend more than that. And so it'll take them half an hour to decide, and they'll hem and haw, and they'll go back and forth, and I can see them thinking about opportunity cost. And one of my kids is always going to end up with some kind of candy, and the other one's going to end up with a bag of chips. So, if they've both narrowed it down, they're debating between potato chips or a Snickers bar. The one that chooses the potato chips, their opportunity cost is that they don't get to have the Snickers bar. And the one that chose the Snickers bar, their opportunity cost is that they don't get to have the potato chips. So when we talk about opportunity costs, we're talking about, what are we actually giving up, not the dollar amount, but what that dollar could be used for. Now, if you're independently wealthy, maybe you don't have to worry about money so much, and that would be nice, but that isn't the world that most of us live in. But we still have opportunity costs in terms of time. So when you devote time to an activity, the opportunity cost would be the next best activities you can't do because you're doing something else. So I decide to spend an hour recording my lectures today, excuse me. What would my next best alternative be? I'd like to be spending more time with my kids. So my opportunity cost of preparing my lecture is that I've sacrificed time with my kids. Big idea number 4, thinking on the margin. So economists tend to think on the margin for most of our analysis, and marginal analysis just means we're looking at smaller incremental changes. So most economic choices are made on a marginal basis, thinking about small changes in behavior, not huge sweeping change in behavior. So as an example, you decide that you go to the grocery store to buy a week's worth of groceries and you intend to spend $100. So marginal thinking means, what are you going to put in the cart? Well, you start with the items that provide you with the greatest value per dollar. So you might go into the store and say, I really, really want to eat a watermelon this week. And so you buy the watermelon first. And then you say, well, I need coffee, because if you're like me, you can't function without coffee, so coffee has a lot of value to you. So that goes in the cart next. And you keep filling up the cart with the things that are giving you the most value per dollar until you've spent your $100. That's how most of us would think through these kinds of decisions, rather than, saying, okay, how many different ways could I possibly spend $100? How many different ways could I fill my grocery cart, and then figure out which one of those carts looks best? That would be too much to think about at once. Big idea number 5 states that tampering with the laws of supply and demand, or market forces, has consequences. So a quick note about our textbook authors. Cowan is a very, very conservative economist. And so when we say conservative economist, basically there's 2 types of economists, if we look at this oversimplified. One group of economists believe that the government can improve economic outcomes, and the other group believes that the government can't improve economic outcomes. So Cowan is a conservative economist, and he's one that believes that the government generally can't improve economic outcomes, and if that's true, we want the government to do as little as possible. And so that's in part why he uses this word tampering. I think that's pretty loaded there. So myself, I'm more of a liberal economist. My main field of specialty is public finance. I look at government taxing and government spending. And if you're a conservative economist, you're not going to be drawn to that field in the first place. Any question that comes up, should the government do this? The answer would always be no. My personal bias is that I tend to be a more liberal economist, thinking that the government can improve economic outcomes. So I've had some students say that this book kind of rubs them the wrong way because it is very conservative. I try to mellow that from the fact that I'm much more liberal, and I think that provides us with some balance. When we look at real-world outcomes are shaped by market forces in terms of how much can we afford and what do prices look like and what are our incomes and such. But they're also shaped by social and government forces. So here in Stevens Point, heavily Catholic area. And one of the social forces, at least during Lent, is that people following the Catholic dietary rules don't eat meat on Fridays. So if I run a restaurant and I decide, wow, I'm not selling any steaks on Fridays, I should put them on sale. I'm trying to use a market force there. But the social forces might trump that. People following Catholic dietary rules during Lent are not going to buy the meat on Friday no matter what I do with the price. So that's a social force. And government forces, of course, also influence this. And we'll be looking at a variety of government forces next week and throughout the course. So instead of saying tampering with the laws of supply and demand has consequences, I think a better phrasing here would be that government interaction in markets usually has good intentions, but may lead to unintended consequences, and often does lead to unintended consequences. So if we're going to make good policy, we should try to predict what impact those government interactions will actually have. Big ideas numbers 6 through 10 are all macroeconomic in nature. This chapter appears in the identical book that's labeled Macroeconomics rather than Microeconomics. It's the one chapter that both have in common. So I'm not as interested in big ideas numbers 6 through 10. On your learning curve assignment for this chapter, there are going to be questions relating to those. You can ignore them, you can skip them, you can answer them to get the points quicker, however you see fit. I've worked with the publisher, and I don't have a way to yank those out, unfortunately. And they're not a bad thing to read, but they're off topic for what we're trying to do. So while they're interesting, we're not going to dwell on those, and I'm not going to be testing you on the number 6 through 10 big ideas. So, to wrap things up, why would anyone want to study economics? So I realize most of you are probably taking this course because you need it for graduation. And that's a perfectly good reason to study economics. I looked at the class list. I think I have one econ major. And the rest of you are here for some other reason. A lot of business accounting majors and other majors that require a course in economics, or possibly to satisfy your general degree requirements. I think it's also important to study economics in order to be a better informed citizen, to understand how the world works and to understand what's going on around you. And that's a really big reason why I think studying economics is important. Studying economics also gives you some tools that might assist you in how to weigh alternatives later on in life, so that's a good Studying economics is good preparation for jobs in business, government, or nonprofits. Most econ majors don't go on to get a doctorate in economics. And if you don't have a master's or a doctorate in economics, you're not going to get a job that comes with the title economist. So most econ majors are not working as economists. They're working in businesses, they're working in the government, they're working for nonprofits. And as economics gives us a solid foundation for understanding how these entities operate and gives good critical thinking skills that are useful in a variety of applications. For those that are planning on going undergraduate problems, economics is obviously good preparation for further study in economics. It's also very good preparation if you're looking at getting a master's or doctorate in business, public policy, law, and a number of other disciplines. The final reason that I think we should study economics is that it's fun, but that might just be me. So that wraps up our Chapter 1 lecture. The next lecture slides I have prepared are a little more hands-on, exploring some of these ideas, and So we'll see you when you pull those up and view those. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I hope everything's going well. Thanks.